Enraged, Snowflake rushed into the arena and immediately spat out a huge fireball. Unprepared, Jonah was blackened by the fire, despite blocking it with the black sword. Before he could react, Snowflake spat out another fireball. It was a ball of true flames. The primitive ancient treasures from the Nine Dragons Palace were not made of the five elements, and neither was the true flame. The fire element in fire elemental techniques belonged to the five elements. However, the true flame was an elixir making fire, and not part of the five elements. Jonah had never seen such a thing before, and he was almost burned like an elixir furnace by Snowflake. Slashing out his black sword and retreating more than 10 steps, he finally regained his balance. However, the fire put a big hole in the chest of his robe. After spitting out 2 fireballs, Snowflake's anger abated a little, and it flew to Jacob's side and carried him easily onto its back. This is a spirit beast. The audience was dumbfounded. With the scarcity of the nature essence on First Heaven, spirit beasts had been extinct, while demon beasts, which were from the same origin, lived at the bottom of the ocean, couldn't be tamed by dragon cultivators. That was why they were astonished when a spirit beast suddenly appeared by Jacob's side. Alarmed, Jonah slashed out the black sword continuously. One after another, black energies flew towards Jacob, but Snowflake dodged them easily with Jacob on its back, and colorful light appeared under its paws. The cultivators who were watching were even more astonished. What is the level of this spirit beast? It could fight with a 6th level cultivator? Even an 8th level cultivator couldn't catch and tame such a spirit beast, they thought. Nonsense! Slamming the arms of the chair, Tom stood up abruptly. The combat exams are 1-to-1. 246 is disqualified for breaking the rules and fighting his opponent with a partner. Tom glared and declared with a resonant voice. A white light beam rushed to his side. The combat exams at the Dragon God Shrine don't rule out spirit beasts. Circulating her full nature essence, Susan said in a louder voice. Since Tom declared that the rules didn't forbid treasures, Susan proclaimed that the rules didn't prohibit spirit beasts either. Hearing Susan's words, the audience began to talk amongst each other. Indeed. Since 197 could use a primitive ancient treasure, why couldn't 246 use a spirit beast? There are only 2 cultivators fighting each other, and the spirit beast couldn't be counted as a cultivator despite its great force, they thought. You. Tom's face paled, while his authority as the main examiner of the East exam area was severely challenged. After half a second of hesitation, he continued. I'm the main examiner, and it's a violation of the rules if I say so. You wouldn't dare. Susan got tough as well. Susan's aura as a mid-tier 8th level cultivator was released suddenly. Among all the cultivators in the area, no one was more powerful than mid-tier 8th level. Even Tom, the main examiner, was only at the 7th level. A level 3 inspector was fighting with a level 4 inspector, who was the main examiner, over a little assistant? Instantly, the cultivators in the East exam area of the Dragon God Shrine were stunned. Such a thing had never happened, not even in their imagination. Susan, are you threatening me over an assisting inspector? Tom clenched his fist and glared at Susan. Yeah, I'm threatening you. What can you do about it? Susan narrowed her eyes and released a stronger aura. The arms on Tom's chair shattered. Under Susan's powerful aura, even a chair made of iron would have been crushed. The level 4 inspectors on both sides of Tom didn't dare to intervene. They knew about Susan's temper. The colder she sounded, the more unapproachable she was. They had never seen her so enraged. Okay. I'll see how long he can last. Tom retreated half a step and sat back in his chair. Susan snorted and returned to the side of the arena. A level 3 inspector threatened the main examiner. The cultivators in the East exam area saw a dramatic scene. It was even more intense than the combat exams themselves. They had understood by now that this 4th level cultivator was Susan's assisting inspector. The level 3 inspector was so partial to her assistant that she even made a scene with the main examiner. Looking at Susan, who had returned to her side, Helen was also shocked. After all, Susan never cared for anyone, and she had never done anything for others this actively as she did for Jacob. And she had never done anything for others this actively as she did for Jacob. In the arena, Snowflake spat out another fireball. With Snowflake's aid, Jacob finally had time to build a sword array with the sword Shadow Scroll. 5 elemental fundamental sword array formations. With 16 sword energies in one group, 20 groups of sword energies of 5 elements flew towards Jonah. Busy blocking Snowflake's fireballs, Jonah didn't have time to block Jacob's attack with his black sword. The fireball exploded. The sword energies attacked Jonah under the cover of the flames. After all, Jonah had just reached the 6th level and was forcefully pushed to mid-tier by the elders. Without the advantage of the black sword, he couldn't unleash the full force of the 6th level, and made the situation tricky for him. The level 3 Snow Lion was equivalent to a top-tier core Formation Realm cultivator according to the Human Cultivator's Realm division. In a sense, Jacob and Snowflake were 2 4th level cultivators fighting against 1 6th level cultivator. 2 Dragons Array Formation. The 320 sword energies were divided into 2 groups that attacked Jonah from both sides. Do you think you can defeat me like this? Jonah emitted a dazzling yellow energy, as if he was wearing thick armor. The sword energies hit Jonah's body, but they couldn't pierce his armor. No matter what, you're only a 4th level cultivator, Jonah said with clenched teeth as he injected Earth Elemental Nature Essence into his arm, making the black sword shine with a yellow light. With the yellow light, the black sword collided with Jacob's sword array and forced Jacob to back off 5 meters. Undoubtedly, Jonah was so far the most powerful opponent Jacob had met in the Dragon God Trine's general exam. Faced with Jacob and Snowflake's attacks from the front and the back, Jonah immediately calmed down and blocked the attacks steadily. Heaven-Earth Array Formation. Jacob's sword energies recognized before flying towards Jonah again. With the restriction of the 5 mountain bracelets, Jacob could only unleash 40% of his nature essence. Otherwise, his sword array would be as powerful as a 5th level attack. Heaven breaks, and earth shatters. Jonah stepped on the ground while holding the sword with both hands. Beams of yellow light rose from the arena and blocked the sword energies. After all, the Earth Elemental Dragons were not weak. Other cultivators might be caught off guard by Jacob's technique, but Jonah had seen them a long time ago. Although the sword Shadow Scroll was unique, Jacob had no hope of winning if he couldn't penetrate Jonah's defense. Since Jonah was not as agile as Jacob, he would change from attacking to defending. After all, the Earth Elemental Dragons excelled in defense. Snowflake could only attack from a distance by spitting out fireballs. However, it could spit no more than 3 powerful fireballs in a short while. If it tried to bite him in close range, it was no match for Jonah. Let's fight this out. While the yellow light around his body darkened, Jonah's black sword suddenly hacked towards Jacob. Jacob withdrew all his sword energies and took out an ordinary sword from his necklace. It was the one he had confiscated from the 5th heaven. He injected nature essence into it and condensed a 5-colored longsword. He knew that no tricks or sneak attacks would work on Jonah. He had to fight him with his own strength. Their swords collided with each other. Jacob's longsword wavered, and his body was forced back 5 to 6 steps. Jonah advanced and attacked Jacob again. Their swords collided again. It was not only a competition of treasures, but a competition of nature essence as well. Jacob's sword had 2 big chips in it. It was not as good as Jonah's black sword. Another collision. The sword in Jacob's hand was going to break into 2, and his heels were touching the edge of the arena. "Loan me swords," Jacob called out to the cultivators behind him. Immediately, 5 to 6 longswords were tossed up from behind him. Jacob caught one and blocked Jonah's attack with it. No match for Jonah's black sword. The sword immediately got a small chip in it, and Jacob's meridians received more shock than the sword. There was a difference of 2 realms between them. Fighting with nature essence was the most reliable way for Jonah to win. Seeing that this new gray sword was about to break into 2, Jacob kicked up another sword with his toes and continued to battle with Jonah. Such a fight seemed crude, but it was a competition of strength. In the blink of an eye, 5 to 6 swords were all chipped, while Jacob turned from one edge of the arena to another. "Loan me swords," Jacob called out again. Generously, the cultivators tossed another 6 to 7 swords onto the arena. Jacob, at 4th level, was fighting a 6th level cultivator with pure force, and many audience members admired him for this, including those who were not members of the water elemental dragon clans. "I'll see how many swords you can get." With the black sword in his hands, Jonah hacked towards him continuously. In the violent collisions, Jacob's dragon core became unstable, and the spiritual core above the dragon core started to shake. Several openings in Jacob's dragon core were unblocked, until the number of unblocked openings reached 136. "Jacob, catch!" More than 10 meters away, Sophie threw a long golden spear towards Jacob, as if she was throwing a javelin. Coiled golden spear, Henry's natal treasure. The coiled golden spear spun in the air as it dashed towards Jacob. Jonah lifted his black sword and used it to hit the spinning spear, and the spear bounced off. Snowflake was staring at Jonah cautiously. It bit onto the golden spear with its mouth and flew over to Jacob. "Thanks." Jacob took the golden spear from Snowflake. He was saying that to both Snowflake and Jonah. If it weren't for Jonah stopping the momentum of the spear, there was no way that Jacob would have been able to catch it. "Let's see how long you can last," Jonah said while waving his black sword and charging towards Jacob. Jacob only knew how to use his fists, not swords, in close-range combat. After fighting with Jonah for a while, his arms were feeling a bit sore. After receiving the spear, he held the front of the spear with his left hand, the back end with his right hand, without thinking, and attacked Jonah, as if the spear were a snake that was trying to capture its prey. Jacob successfully hit the body of Jonah's sword and made it go off trajectory. Good. The cultivators outside the arena simultaneously cheered for Jacob. They subconsciously became supporters of Jacob. They all hoped that the underdog would win against the stronger adversary. The 2 weapons collided once again. Jonah was forced to take a half a step back when faced with a long, sharp spear. Jacob pierced at Jonah using his spear forcefully and redeemed himself. Although Jacob didn't learn how to use a spear systematically, he learned how to use his fists by practicing fundamental boxing techniques. From the perspective of martial arts, both spears and fists were similar in principle. This golden spear was delicately made and was created with tough materials. It was once Henry's natal treasure. Since it was meant to be the South Atlantic Crown Prince's natal treasure, the spear was really powerful. However, when Henry was imprisoned by the North Atlantic Dragon Palace, his natal treasure was confiscated. Jacob lacked an appropriate weapon to fight against Jonah. While watching the battle, General Arthur suddenly remembered that this golden spear was in his storage ring and thus passed it to Sophie. Jacob breathed heavily as he held the end of the spear and used it to fight. The tip of the spear was extremely sharp and was being used by Jacob effectively, giving Jonah a hard time approaching Jacob. The golden spear had incredible powers and was a great treasure. It allowed the smooth passage of nature essence. The materials that were used on the golden spear even exceeded that of Susan's white sword in terms of quality. The golden spear and the black sword kept colliding with each other, creating a ton of sparks due to friction. While Jacob used sufficient nature essence to fight against Jonah, Henry, who still had connections with his natal treasure, was suffering from the pain of Jacob's battle. Jacob used Henry's natal treasure to fight against the 6th level cultivator. Each time the coiled golden spear was damaged, Henry's body and mind would both be hurt, even though he was far away, It was killing him. The soldiers at the North Atlantic Dragon Palace used long spears. Jacob saw their training many times. The fundamental boxing technique and the fundamental spear technique were from the same branch of techniques. Therefore, Jacob was able to increase his confidence in battle, and he fought more and more fiercely. Spear was the king of cold weapons. Jonah knew he couldn't win within a short amount of time and was agitated. He wanted to preserve his nature essence for later battles, but he infused his 6th level nature essence into the black sword and pierced it at Jacob after losing his cool. The impact of the collision of nature essences made Jacob's dragon core vibrate. A few openings were forcefully unblocked in this extreme situation. "I don't believe I can't defeat you," Jonah thought. There was no way he could take the humiliation of being defeated by a 4th level cultivator. He continued to use more power, and the yellow light around his sword became even brighter. Sparks flew all over the place. Jacob backed off 3 steps. However, another 3 openings were unblocked. He had finally understood what it meant to level up and get stronger during battle. Jacob felt like his entire body was burning. The new openings needed more nature essence to nurture them. The sword and spear collided with each other even faster. "I'll see how long you can hold off." Jonah was like a mad dog as he attacked Jacob ferociously. Jonah's black sword was unharmed, but Jacob's golden spear had strips of scratches on it. As Jacob backed off, withstood Jonah's attacks, he had reached 152 openings. That was close to mid-tier 4th level. In the midst of the tense battle, Jacob was both anxious and thrilled. Even though he could be defeated at any moment, his strength was increasing every second. Jacob's nature essence is overflowing. He should have surpassed 4th level, right? Outside the arena, Helen turned to Draken and asked. He is practicing the Sword Shadow Scroll, which is different from normal techniques. The amount of nature essence that he stores in his body far exceeds any normal cultivator at his level, Draken explained. Ever since Draken found out that Jacob's technique was unique and powerful, he transferred the training scroll to the purple grade level, which was the highest level in the Profound Cultivation Palace. He didn't want other cultivators to have easy access to it. Another fierce attack's impact sent Jacob back for 5 steps, and he tightly squeezed the golden spear that had scratches all over it. "Snowflake!" Jacob shouted. Snowflake flew over and lifted Jacob with colorful flames under its paws. "Go!" Jacob pointed the spear at Jonah. Snowflake gave out an excited roar. Without hesitation, it dashed towards Jonah violently. Jacob pierced fiercely with the golden spear, and Jonah was only able to defend himself in time. However, he was lifted and thrown to the back as a result. Jonah's entire body emitted a golden yellow light. He firmly stood his ground in the arena and stopped himself from going anywhere. Jacob swung the golden spear as Snowflake charged to the other side of the arena, where Jonah was. Jacob was charging towards Jonah from the sky, and the impact from the boost of Snowflake's speed was far from just terrifying. Jonah was finally forced to dodge instead of defend, and he quickly rolled to his right to escape the attack. The golden spear made a massive hole in the floor of the arena. Jacob pulled the spear out from the big hole. He then looked at Jonah with a much calmer expression. Snowflake's paws released a colorful light, while its legs were golden and its body was white. It looked extremely cool. Suddenly, Jacob used his long spear to pierce. As Snowflake moved forward, Jacob's golden spear once again pierced ahead. A loud noise echoed through the arena. The golden spear put a long scratch that was lit bright red like fire on the black sword. With a swift movement, the spear glided right towards Jonah's throat. Jacob shook his wrist, and Jonah was quickly pushed more than 10 meters away by the powerful impact. Jacob and Snowflake were like great partners that could read each other's minds. In the battle between Jacob and Jonah, Jacob was like a cavalier, and Jonah was like a foot soldier. Jacob had the advantage. Jonah clenched his teeth. He knew he couldn't overpower Jacob with even the strongest flight treasure since the snow line was too fast. The cultivators around them all knew that Jacob could have targeted Jonah's throat in the last attack, but Jacob showed mercy. The even stronger cultivators were able to tell that Jonah had little nature essence left at this point, since the black sword was powerful, but also consumed a large amount of energy. Snowflake landed in the arena, with flames around its paws, and left black marks on the white stone floor as it ran. Jacob thrust forward 3 times in a row. Jonah held the sword tightly, but his wrist was almost broken. Then his hand finally let go of his black sword. Jacob stood up on Snowflake's back and leaped forward, grabbing the black sword. The vast power of ancient times immediately rushed into Jacob's mind. The black sword resonated. "Let me try." Jacob stabbed the golden spear into the ground and took the sword before striking forward with it. The black sword let out 3 times the power compared to when Jonah was using it. How is this possible? Jonah was shocked. Jacob was only at 4th level, but was able to use the black sword better than him? A 6th level cultivator? He didn't know that the black sword was a primitive ancient treasure. The sword shadow scroll made Jacob cultivate all 5 elemental essences, and the combination of the 5 elemental essences was the energy. It was a power that was best suited for the black sword. Not only was Jonah shocked, but all the cultivators around the arena were speechless as well. Jacob's clothes were torn. He had blood dripping from his body. However, when he took the black sword that was crooked and dented, he looked like a god. When Jacob wasn't paying attention, Jonah took advantage of it and rolled over to the golden spear before pulling it up. Jonah used all his remaining nature essence and aimed the spear at Jacob. Jacob, with only 40% of his nature essence, swung the black sword and blocked the attack. Jonah spat out a mouthful of blood and was pushed away for more than 10 meters. He was like a loose kite swaying down towards the ground. More than a dozen elders from the Spirit Mountain Dragon clan rushed to catch the falling cultivator. Jonah was half dead at this point, and the presence of a strong 6th-level cultivator was nowhere to be seen. Good fight. Jacob bowed and threw the black sword lightly towards the elders from Spirit Mountain. The black sword was a valuable treasure, but Jacob was not the type of person to take other people's treasures. An elder, Spirit Mountain, caught the black sword. He looked at Jacob and thought for half a second before saying, "The Spirit Mountain Dragon Clan admits defeat. You won fair and square." From the simple fact that Jacob returned the black sword, he showed better manners than Jonah. Jonah had always been conceited. Now that he lost to a 4th-level cultivator and almost lost a valuable treasure, his cultivation path would probably end here at the Dragon God Shrine and would not increase any further. Meanwhile, at the South Atlantic Dragon Palace, Henry, who still had connections with the Golden Spear, finally passed out from the pain. The Golden Spear, the black sword, had collided in the battle for over 20 minutes. While Jacob was able to unblock new openings, the coiled Golden Spear was scratched and hurt, and Henry, who was far at the South Atlantic Dragon Palace, handled and took on the pain. On the side of the arena, a proud smile appeared on Susan's face. The main examiner on the viewing platform, Tom, looked awful. He let out a cold snort, waved his hand, and announced, "Next battle." Jacob took the golden spear with him while he walked out of the arena. The crowd around him parted automatically to create a path for him to walk through. After defeating Jonah, Jacob was in the top 6 in the East exam area, meaning that he was now in the top 24 of the Dragon God Shrine's entire exams. As long as he could win just one more battle, he could move up from assisting inspector to an official inspector. Snowflake shrunk back to the size of a palm, and it jumped up and down by Jacob's feet. However, even with its cuteness, none of the cultivators in the area dared to look down on it. "You did great," Sophie said with excitement and walked up to Jacob. "I'll give this back to you." Jacob gave the golden spear back to her. Sophie passed the golden spear to General Arthur. The latter put it behind his back. Surprisingly, there was a storage space inside General Arthur's hunched back. Snowflake continuously wagged its tail because it wanted attention from those around it. "Snowflake, you were also awesome." Snowfie bent down and picked Snowflake up, and Snowflake was so excited that it happily yipped in her arms. There are 5 more battles left in the round. We should find a place to rest, Jacob said. Are you okay? Sophie then asked him a little seriously. I'm okay. Jacob waved his hands and jumped to a place with fewer people. Now that everyone had gathered around the grand arena, the other 24 smaller arenas were almost empty. Jacob went to the farthest one and sat down cross-legged. He took out the small porcelain bottle and rolled out 5 essence replenish pills before eating each individually. Having used up such a large amount of nature essence in such a short amount of time, Jacob could only use elixir pills to restore some energy. If the other cultivators saw Jacob eating 5 essence replenish pills at once, they would be very envious and shocked. The wounds on Jacob's shoulders weren't small, and he had more injuries all over his body. The ointment that Susan gave him before was used up, so he had stored it in a little ceramic bottle and kept it in his storage space. That isn't very effective. Use this one. Jacob suddenly heard a neutral voice from behind him. A small light brown bottle was tossed over to him. Jacob turned over, and Susan was half a meter behind him. The wounds are fairly deep. It's better if you use this one instead, Susan said. Thanks. Jacob waved at her with the bottle in hand. He poured some of the dark liquid onto his hands and quickly rubbed it on his wounds, through the massive cuts in his robe. The liquid seeped through his skin and into his muscles, and he immediately felt that his wounds were closing. After he found out the effectiveness of this medicine, he carefully handled it so that he wouldn't waste any of it. Although his wounds were healed, his robe was still torn. Susan, what's the name of this ointment? Jacob asked Susan. Blossoming skin ointment, Susan answered. I only used a little. There's still a lot left, Jacob quickly explained. Then he stood up and handed the bottle back to Susan. Susan looked at Jacob and felt speechless. She took the bottle from Jacob's hand and put it into her ring. If you need it later, come and find me, she said. Without another word, Susan jumped onto her longsword and flew towards the grand arena. Just then, Kathy squeezed through the crowd around the grand arena and rushed over to Jacob. She immediately told him, I forgot to tell you earlier, but I have foundation establishment pills with me if you wanted to steady your realm. She took out a small white bottle from her pocket and showed Jacob. Foundation establishment pills? Yeah, the foundation establishment pills are not only useful for cultivators to break through to the foundation establishment realm. It can also firm one's foundation, Kathy explained. She had recently learned a lot from Noah on how to make more common elixir pills, and she also picked up a lot of knowledge on the theories. Jacob took the bottle from her hands. On the bottle, there was a little label that said, Foundation Establishment Pills, Level 4, 20 pills. He took out 5 Foundation Establishment pills and ate them individually. The 5 Essence Replenishment pills quickly restored his nature essence, while the 5 Foundation Establishment pills were quickly absorbed into his meridian, making him feel all warm on the inside. There wasn't much time for them to chat. Jacob closed his eyes and started to use his sword shadow scroll. In the fierce battle, Jacob had reached 162 openings in the Dragon Core and was on the mid-tier 4th level. With the 5 elemental sword energies moving in his body, repairing the Dragon Core, and restoring his nature essence, Jacob would be able to unlock more openings smoothly in the future with the help of the Foundation Establishment pills. When Jonah forced himself to reach a new realm before the Dragon God Shrine's general exam, with the help of the 16 Elders of Spirit Mountain, he didn't have any high-quality elixir pills to support his realm. His body did not have time to get used to his new power, and it hurt his body instead of helping him. The Elders of Spirit Mountain had warned him ahead of time that if he met a cultivator that was at a high realm, he shouldn't force himself to win. Instead, he should just admit defeat. However, Jonah didn't think that he would lose to Jacob, who was only at the 4th level. If he had possessed a few level 4 Foundation Establishment pills to supplement his cultivation, then his power during today's fight at mid-tier 6th level would have been stable, and the outcome of the battle might have been different. Not having a strong support team would lead to bad endings. Conversely, Jacob had a strong support team, and it made him extremely powerful. 4 hours later, Jacob slowly opened his eyes, and his entire body was relaxed. Master, Jacob heard Jade and Julia's voices from afar. Jacob looked up and saw Jade and Julia standing on the brink of the small arena, and they were looking at him cheerfully. Seeing that he had finished cultivating, they walked towards Jacob. "Congratulations, Master! You've reached the mid-tier 4th level." Jacob gave out a light smile and asked Jade, "What match is on right now?" "The 5th battle is almost over, Master," Jade said. "What's the situation like?" he immediately asked. Jacob wanted to see the battles himself, but he needed to restore his physical strength and nature essence while he still had time. Getting ready for his own battle was more important. "In the 3 battles that just finished, 2 5th level and 1 6th level cultivator lost. It's the 5th battle right now, and it looks like it's about to be over as well," Jade said. "Let's go over and watch," Jacob stood up and asked. "Where so?" "The Dragon King and the Dragon Queen are with her. They don't want her to talk to her uncle right now," Jade said. This must be tough for her, Jacob thought and sighed. The 4 of them walked towards the grand arena. The cultivators who were watching the fight quickly created a path for them to pass. Jade and Julia didn't give out the auras of 8th level cultivators. However, Jacob, who had the identity token 246, was known for defeating a 6th level cultivator. He was a rising star. The bell at the Dragon God Shrine rang. It was 7 in the evening now. Torches around the arenas lit up, one by one. The sky dimmed down, while the torches sparkled brightly around the exam area. With the torch lights, the Black Dragon God Shrine looked even more mysterious. "One can't hold on any longer," Jade said. Just when Jade finished her words, the 6th level cultivator was thrown out of the arena. The identity token of the defeated cultivator flew from his waist and onto Tom's hand. "Next," Tom said while waving his hand. He seemed a bit bored and tired. On the west side of the arena, a bright yellow light lit up. The black-faced and black-bearded Kenneth jumped into the arena as the light shone on him. A chubby wood elemental cultivator landed from the sky so heavily that the floor of the arena cracked. The wood elemental cultivator had a chubby body that looked like a tree trunk, and he was almost 1 head shorter than Kenneth. However, no one dared to underestimate his abilities. He was a 7th level cultivator. His aura expanded outward in the arena. A dim, soft green light lit up the entire East exam area. 720 sword energies surrounded Kenneth's body. The identity token on their waists were both emitting faint yellow lights. "He can't beat his opponent," Jade said quietly. Kenneth took out a wooden box from his black ring calmly. From the box, he took out a pill. It was a godly elixir pill from the 9 Dragon Palace. Empowerment Elixir Pill. Immediately, the 7th level cultivator who knew this was shocked, and his eyes opened wide. Kenneth was so desperate to win this battle that he was willing to sacrifice an ancient godly elixir pill. Tom saw the elixir pill as he was yawning, and he shivered and almost stood up. This pill was dark, and it contained the power that belonged to the ancient immortals. In this Dragon God Shrine's general exam, it was surprising primitive ancient treasures were used in even a godly elixir pill. These items from the 9 Dragon Palace were extremely powerful and could help one win the battle if the match was close. Kenneth put the elixir in his mouth and swallowed it. Right at this moment, many of the cultivators were shocked and became even more attentive. The empowerment elixir pills could increase one's nature essence in a short amount of time, and it was incredibly useful during a deadly battle. However, most cultivators believed that it was a waste to use such a precious elixir, even if it were for the Dragon God Shrine's general exam. The special usage of the empowerment elixir pill was during heavenly tribulations. It could enable one to successfully overcome the challenge through increased nature essence. After eating the empowerment elixir pill, Kenneth's power and aura increased immensely. The 720 sword energies were now buzzing and resonating with each other. Kenneth stepped back heavily with his left foot. He looked as if he were an arrow that was about to dash towards the wood elemental cultivator. The 7th level cultivator had a soft flash of light in his hand. An array of light came into existence from the wooden stick. The light, like a willow, grew many branches. Spring gave birth to all. The wood elemental cultivator had incredible skills. Although he looked like a chubby young man, he had cultivated for over 400 years. The unique feature of wood elemental techniques was that the practitioner could stay forever young. Sophie looked anxious as she pulled Draken and Helen towards Jacob. Where Jacob was standing was closer to the arena, so they were able to see it more clearly. Snowflake had transformed into its snow lion form, and Noah was sitting on its back. He looked relaxed if he were sitting on a chair, since Snowflake was no longer a secret and no longer had to stay in Jacob's necklace. Sir, the thing that Elder Kenneth just used was a godly elixir pill, right? Jacob asked Draken as he walked over. Yeah, Draken frowned. He's at the 5th level now. Is it okay for him to use it? Jacob asked worriedly. When Jacob retrieved the elixir pills from the 9 Dragon Palace, Draken and the elders had carefully examined and researched the elixirs. They concluded that if a low-level cultivator used the elixir pills, their bodies would not be able to bear the power and would have the risk of self-exploding. Therefore, most elixir pills were stored in a secret place. Only a small proportion of the elixir pills were given to the strongest elders of the North Atlantic Dragon Palace. Draken remained silent. He stared straight at the arena, frowning even more. He was extremely worried. In the arena, the 720 sword energies that were tied by the willow branches like wood elemental nature essence suddenly exploded. The loud noise of explosions sounded as the wood elemental nature essence was crushed. The impact of the blast shook all the cultivators surrounding the arena and made them take a step back. The 7th level cultivator suddenly turned pale. The wooden stick was his natal treasure, and he was injured when the nettle essence of it got damaged. The strong impact of the explosion impressed the cultivators who were watching. Kenneth was only a 5th level cultivator who had eaten an ancient godly elixir, but he had successfully pushed a 7th level cultivator to the brink of defeat. What if a 7th level cultivator, or even an 8th level cultivator, ate the empowerment elixir pill? They could probably get halfway to the heavenly dragon realm, they thought. Great! I hope Uncle wins! Sophie, who was standing next to General Arthur, let out the breath that she was holding and said, Elder Kenneth is strong and fierce. He's going to win, General Arthur said as he went along with Sophie and nodded his head. However, Jacob thought of other problems. He turned to Draken and asked, where did the empowerment elixir pill come from? Jacob had gone through the burden of retrieving a few bottles of godly elixir pills from the 9 Dragon Palace. However, at that time, Kenneth had already left the North Atlantic Dragon Palace. Therefore, there was only 2 ways that he could have gotten the elixir pill. The first possibility was that Kenneth sneaked back to the North Atlantic Dragon Palace and took them. The second possibility was that Kenneth sneaked into the 9 Dragon Palace and got his own elixir pills. I stored the godly elixir pills secretly. We shouldn't lose them, Draken responded as he thought for a moment. He said, but I put 5 godly elixir pills in Kenneth's palace. So, Kenneth did come back, but he just didn't want to see us, Helen said. If only he had these godly elixir pills back then, he might have been able to become a heavenly dragon with their help. Draken sighed lightly. General Arthur suddenly came over and said, Dragon King, although there are still godly elixir pills in storage, the power of these elixir pills is so strong that if one ate one pill, he or she wouldn't be able to eat the same type within 100 years. Elder Kenneth has eaten the empowerment elixir pill now, which means... Draken thought for a few seconds and was worried. Although Kenneth ate an empowerment elixir pill in battle, there was still more at the North Atlantic Dragon Palace, so they weren't anxious about the waste of treasures. However, Kenneth now could no longer eat another empowerment elixir pill for at least the next 100 years. If Kenneth returned to peak 8th level, He no longer could rely on the empowerment elixir pill to surpass the heavenly tribulation. For the first time, Kenneth had reached the peak 8th level in just 200 years. If he were to retrain, he shouldn't take too long, maybe in 100 years. He would be able to return to peak 8th level and perhaps even charge at the Heavenly Dragon realm. Jacob stood next to General Arthur and Draken, listening to their conversations, and thought how strange the situation was. If Kenneth only wanted to increase his realm through battle, he didn't need to waste a godly elixir pill, especially if it meant he would lose the ability to use another empowerment elixir pill for 100 years. In the arena, the wood elemental cultivator rapidly took 5 steps back. In his hand, a light appeared once again, and the wooden stick was once again reborn. It turned into vines and covered the whole battlefield. "Give up," Kenneth shouted. He was in the center of the sword energies as they spread out in all 4 directions. The 720 sword energies rapidly expanded like blazing fire, burning every bit of the vine. Kenneth opened his eyes wide, and the brown robe puffed up with the impact of the explosion. It seemed as if his body couldn't withhold such strong and wild nature essence. Although the realm 5th level wasn't low, it also wasn't high. Kenneth eating the godly elixir pill at the 5th level was risky. His body could explode at any moment. After seeing how Kenneth was willing to risk his life for the battle, Jacob suddenly realized why Kenneth entered the Dragon God Shrine's general exam. He was probably aiming for the Core Lotus too. The last time Kenneth failed in the Heavenly Tribulation, his Dragon Core exploded, and his realm was destroyed. Although Noah saved his life with elixirs made from snow lotuses, his Dragon Core was barely repaired, and his mystic crystal had been completely destroyed. Now that he cultivated the sword Shadow Scroll, which required all 5 elements to be absorbed together, he would want the best mystic crystal, which was located right in the Dragon God Shrine. In the arena, the sword energies were like a raging storm, destroying everything in its way. The Wood Elemental 7th level cultivator didn't get the chance to use his powers to recover, and he was already under Kenneth's sword energies attack. Then the sword energies merged and became one enormous sword. The sword was over 40 meters long. Kenneth accumulated sufficient nature essence and pointed ahead. The enormous sword dashed forward with a piercing light. All the cultivators had to close their eyes. Jacob, who was standing near the arena, had to use his nature essence to keep his eyes open to witness what was going to happen. The sword energy slashed down. The grand arena that was 300 meters wide, 300 meters long, and 1 meter thick got cut in 2. A hole that was 200 meters long and 50 meters wide appeared in the arena, and one could see the bottom of the ground. Black dirt was visible. Kenneth's strike completely destroyed the grand arena. Snowflake was standing in front of Sophie, blocking the little rocks that blew over from the explosion. It was protecting her. When the audience started to open their eyes, they saw the chubby wood elemental cultivator slowly climbing out of the hole and waving his hand. He was admitting defeat. Tom raised his arm and pulled over the identity token from the 7th level cultivator's waist, and it turned black immediately. "Uncle! Uncle!" Sophie shouted out while waving her hands at Kenneth. Kenneth had defeated 2 7th level cultivators in a row. Kenneth stepped out of the collapsing arena and went outside. "Elder Kenneth!" General Arthur rushed to greet him. "I don't want to see anyone before the general exams are over." Kenneth waved. A sword energy was released, pushing General Arthur 5 steps back. "The final 6 cultivators shall fight again tomorrow at 7 in the morning," Tom and the other examiners announced together. Then they followed the main examiner, Tom, out towards the Dragon God Shrine. Anyone could see that the main examiner, Tom, was in a terrible mood. At the same time, 6 inspectors walked to the 6 finalists respectfully. They led them to their rooms to rest. The cultivators who were beside Jacob's room during the written exam were now in the crowd, staring at Jacob in amazement. Who would have thought that a 4th level cultivator would be able to get himself into the top 6 in the East exam area of the thousands of cultivators? The difference between cultivators was so large. "Please follow me." A level 2 inspector who wore a long silver robe walked in front of Jacob and led him to a room on the outskirts of the Dragon God Shrine. Kenneth was led toward his room by another inspector. All the top 6 cultivators, along with their support teams, were going to live in the same building. The temporary residence was a wooden building with 3 floors. The first floor was a dining area, and the second and third floors were bedrooms. Kenneth, who walked in front of Jacob and was led by an inspector, went straight to a second-floor room. Seemed like he didn't plan to eat on the first floor. Sophie looked at Kenneth's back with a sad gaze, but she also knew her uncle well. If Kenneth was not going to see anyone, it was no use even if she went up to him. Jacob's group's rooms were on the third floor. The ones with the best views, Jade and Julia, Draken and Helen, Sophie and Kathy, Noah and Snowflake, and Elder Liam and Elder Frank. Each pair got a room. The remaining, Jacob and General Arthur, were put into one room. They had a total of 6 rooms, and they occupied most of the rooms on the third floor. Since Jacob entered the top 6 in the East exam area, the Dragon God Shrine must arrange accommodations for everyone who came with Jacob. Otherwise, even if the Dragon God Shrine wanted to be friendly towards the North Atlantic Dragon Palace, at most they could get rooms on the second floor. Only the cultivators who were going to participate in tomorrow's battle and their support groups could get good rooms on the third floor. Jacob entered his room, went to the window and pushed it open. At night, the platform the Dragon God Shrine was on looked like a small town, immersed in the darkness. The small rooms and buildings around were like chess pieces, and the Dragon God Shrine that was in the center of the platform was hidden in the darkness. Susan returned to the Dragon God Shrine to rest. Of course, she wouldn't be living in a temporary residence. These kind of motel-style buildings were used on a large scale only during the Dragon God Shrine's general exam. The 3-story building was surrounded by several small 2-story buildings and 1-story bungalows. Therefore, the 3-story building seemed very tall among the shorter houses. The cultivators who made it into the top 12 in the East exam area but failed to enter the top 6 together with their support teams were placed in the 2-story buildings. Once the Dragon God Shrine's general exams were over, they would all become new assisting inspectors. The cultivators who made it out of their groups but failed to become the top 12 in the East exam area were placed in the 1-story bungalows. These cultivators were just one step away from entering the top 48 and becoming assisting inspectors. Therefore, these people would be participating in next year's general exams for sure, and they might be future assisting inspectors and even official inspectors. For the other cultivators who lost early, if they didn't want to leave the Dragon God Shrine, wanted to watch the combat exams tomorrow, they could only sleep outside. This kind of differential treatment was an indication of the attitude of the Dragon God Shrine. This organization respected power. No matter which forces or clans the cultivators came from, they were strong enough, they could join the Dragon God Shrine and stand far above the ordinary cultivators. When Jacob was standing at the window, of course some cultivators who were standing outside looked up at him. Jacob's waist was still shining with the yellow identity token flashing, and these cultivators were looking at Jacob with respect. To be able to live on the 3rd floor of the 3rd-story building, powerful strength was a must. This seemingly ordinary 3-story wooden building was in the dreams and fantasies of many cultivators. It was a place where they couldn't get close, even if they gave their best try. Seeing the envious eyes on the ground, Jacob gently closed the window and sat down by the bed. The current situation was that he was one of the top 6 in the East exam area, and one of the top 24 overall. To become one of the 10 official inspectors, Jacob had to gain at least 1 more victory. If he wanted to be in the top 3, he must win 2 more. Jacob took a long breath. He sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. Prince, you may practice with ease. Your humble servants will guard the surroundings for you, General Arthur said, as he lifted a chair and sat down behind the door, guarding the room for Jacob. Thank you, General Arthur. Jacob smiled. He was indeed worried that someone might disturb him. The room was small, but it was exceptionally quiet. When Jacob closed the window, he could not hear the sounds outside the building. Obviously, this 3-story wooden structure was equipped with a soundproof array formation, allowing the cultivators who would be competing tomorrow to cultivate or sleep in peace. Sword energy swam around Jacob, and they were like Jacob's eyes. Through them, he was able to feel the room vaguely. Every sword energy held a bit of Jacob's spiritual sense, and he spread the sword energies to the corners of the room and felt that his mind was continually expanding. Sitting in front of the door, General Arthur bent over and held onto his chair with both hands. Gradually showing signs of falling asleep, Jacob's sword energies were like flickering starlight, scattered in the room but completely silent. Having no idea which room Kenneth was in, Jacob suddenly moved his sword energy and tried his luck. A faint sword energy, only the size of a fingernail, slipped out of the door and ran down the wooden corridor to the second floor. Jacob's spiritual sense controlled the sword energy, and it slipped into the first room. Who is it? A 6th-level cultivator who was cultivating immediately felt strange and shouted. Jacob's sword energy rushed out through the crack in the door and then ran along the hallway to the room next door. The sword energy bumped into something when it was traveling through the crack in the door and bounced off immediately. The cultivator in that room was obviously more cautious and set up an array formation. Fortunately, such a weak sword energy didn't trigger the array formation, and Jacob hurriedly pulled back the sword energy and moved it to the next room. This time, the weak sword energy entered the crack in the door smoothly, and Jacob felt that the person in the room was Kenneth. At this moment, Kenneth was sweating intensely, and his body glowed in a 5-colored light. Tempting the body with the 5 elemental nature essences, it turned out that he was practicing the sword shadow scroll this way. Jacob's mind moved a little, and this little movement of the sword energy immediately alerted Kenneth. The latter felt that there was a spiritual sense exploring his room, and 4 sharp sword energies immediately pierced toward the faint light at the door. "Who's this coward that dares to spy on me?" Kenneth shouted fiercely. Jacob's glimmer of light was surrounded by Kenneth's sword energies, and he didn't even have a chance to escape and perished immediately. Jacob, who was in the room on the 3rd floor, felt an intense pain throughout his entire body, as if he had a tendon pulled off. His head fell, was knocked onto the floor instantly. With 2 streaks of blood under his nose, Jacob almost had a nature essence backlash when that pain hit him. Napping at the door, General Arthur suddenly woke up. Prince, are you all right?" He hurried to Jacob, trying hard to help him up. Jacob's nose was bleeding, and the instantaneous loss of nature essence made Jacob fall to the floor. "Prince, your nature essence is strong, but you cannot over-cultivate." General Arthur hurriedly took Jacob to the bed and advised him. Nothing, Jacob gasped. His head was still blank. The feeling that his entire body was sore, and the ability to use a trace of nature essence remained in Jacob's body. After Kenneth shattered the sword energy this time, how could Jacob dare to casually release sword energies to spy around next time? "Prince, you have to take care of yourself. The future of the Dragon Palace depends on you." General Arthur assisted Jacob and said. Jacob raised his hand and was about to respond with a few words, but General Arthur said with a heavy tone, "You and Princess Soph are the hope of the Dragon Palace. The children and grandchildren of the royal family are dependent on you two." Jacob's nosebleed just showed a sign of a slight pause, but they immediately jetted out again.